On the day Ghana won against one of our rivals in our group, South Korea. And just a short while ago, one of the teams that we are preparing to serve revenge, as you know, is best served cold to Uruguay. Also just lost against Portugal. So which means we are second in our group and on course to qualify. All we need to do, we just need a draw really against Uruguay, but we won't take a draw because we need to serve that revenge cold. On this good day, let's talk about the budget because we have to celebrate. We've celebrated a bit, but then there are real hard things still talking about the reality today. You know, the football takes you into a realm of utopia and excitement and ecstasy. After that, you come back to the reality. The reality is that we're still in an economic crisis that we first need to survive. And so, we're going to talk to businesses whose job it is to employ people and make sure this economy is ticking. They are the life's blood of our economy. Everything you heard the finance minister talk about in the budget last week will come down to how it affects businesses, how it affects employees, and how it affects you. But fundamentally, you are an employee in a business. If the business is not doing well, and the budget is hitting them in the way that is negative, you can bet that it will affect you. That is why tonight I'm bringing together some business people who are actually in the job of employing and actually running the economy at that level to give me their take on what they had in a budget. Let's start with some of the very basic numbers. And those numbers, a lot of people are watching very closely. You can argue that the fundamental reason why we are where we are is that we've been living beyond our means for so long, right? Anytime, even at home, in your own personal economy, when you begin to live beyond your means, you end up eventually in a place of huge debt. It's not sustainable, and you crash. You become very poor, but you can't sleep because you're owing a lot of people. That is what Ghana has been doing. And so if you look at the 2023 budget, we are not changing that story quite significantly because total revenue is still projected to be 143 billion. However, we are going to spend 205 billion cedis. So again, we are living beyond our means. And so we have a deficit of 61 billion. We have to make up for this. You have to find money to make up for this. You are eating more, you are driving big cars, you are, sleeping in a big house. Meanwhile, you have no money to finance all the lavish lifestyle. That is a simple case of Ghana. And you see it even in the 2023 budget in the midst of the crisis, that you think that you have to do something absolutely drastic so that you ensure that this here is lower than this. Then you'll be within your means. So somehow we have to find something here to break this gap. That is Ghana's problem, to put it simply. Eating more than your pocket can take. That's what the problem is. And the 2023 story won't change, which is what many people have looked at and said, why? At this time, cut the number of ministers, reduce them by half. That possibly will reduce this number. Even if you're even achieve parity, you're there. And then we look at public debt stock. It's related, right? Because if you're spending more than you're earning, then your debt will go up. No wonder. We are going to spend 467 billion in terms of our debt stock alone, the total amount you're talking about. And if you break it down, domestic is 195 billion and external is 71 billion, right? We are borrowing domestic, external, so we can fund our lifestyle that we can't afford. As simple as that. That is the reality of Ghana right now. And so our debt is here, huge, right? So, yeah, and so you've heard a lot about restructuring. Those who have lent their money to government, you, myself, people who have bought bonds, etc., who have one way or the other, given money to government to whatever it is, well, you're here. You take a cut, you take a hit. And then those foreigners who are holding a lot of government bonds will also take a hit. And I'm pretty sure you've heard, an interview with the deputy minister, he's laying some of the proposals on the table. right? Government says when they finish, they will announce and let us know. So that's the picture here. But then you come to tax reviews that we saw in the budget. And remember, we are talking to businesses, right? So we are going to isolate some of the things that will affect business directly. One of the things that will affect business directly is tax. We've seen that the VAT, one of the things, VAT has gone up by 2.5%. That instantly will affect the businesses. And when it affects them, they'll pass it on to you. So in essence, was a business suffer, you will take the hit for that. But the businesses will find a way. We'll hear from a business point of view. How are they, having taken this hit here in the VAT, going to accommodate this going forward? Are they going to be, and a lot of them are telling me already, they'll confirm that they are looking at cutting costs. That may include in 2023, sacking workers or letting workers go home. So we haven't really, the worst of this is yet to come. And the businesses will give us a sense of how they plan to cope. In the year of 2023 is possibly when we're going to feel this more, because the year of austerity that we haven't seen before. IMF program will come on board, but we need to cut and make sure that this deficit, we do something about it. So VAT is going to come. You're going to pay more. Revenue will go up, but businesses will struggle somehow. And then we also have, of course, the current issue with the e-levy in the budget. They've reviewed it down from 1.5 to 1%, but the threshold for when you don't pay anything has also been removed. So the poor will be hit. And then you look at some of the measures that had come in. Some of them will isolate quickly and talk about introduction of the withholding taxes on winnings from bettings. So yeah, that's good. I mean, that's a luxury tax maybe. So they should pay income tax and income tax stamp reviewed and increased. That's one, of course, may hit most of us. Upper limit to the gratuity rate of personal income also going up by 30%. We're talking about introduction of withholding tax on gains from realization of assets, also going to go up. We've seen the benchmark discount policy and the port full abolishment of that, which means that you're paying full value, right? But that means that paying full value is going to discourage investment and encourage production locally. So maybe that has a positive impact on local production, because we're importing too much in this economy. Part of the reason why there's so much pressure on the dollar. Tax waivers are on hold. Some say this is good. Review of the exemption regime for free zones entities as well is a key thing that we've seen. But then if you look at cumulative cost of oil imports, which is one of the things that is eating away our foreign reserves, and now we are down to what 2.9 months or so of import cover. It is pretty stuttering going into, if the IMF program doesn't come on board. And then the Bank of Ghana governor was asked that question today. We are in apocalyptic territory. If our foreign reserves dwindle because of this, look at how much we spent, 4 billion cumulatively since January alone. And the Bank of Ghana governor talks about that, 4 billion we spent. So we wiped away our foreign reserves, the foreign reserves that we used to buy crude oil, oil imports and medicines, etc. We've wiped out that 4 billion alone just to bring in oil imports. Let's just imagine that. That is huge. But what it means is that we are now running out of reserves to bring in essential commodities onto the market, like medicine. That is where we are headed if we don't get this sorted very, very quickly. And then you look at this conversation around trying to help us all have, good deals at the pumps. This innovative solution that the vice president announced, the gold for oil barter arrangement. If you look at the total gold reserves we have is 8.74 tons, and that comes down to $469 million in real value. That's what we have now. Government says they are increasing this so we can exchange that for oil. That will come in cheaper if you, instead of buying it with the dollars. And then we know this particular policy you see there is one that will affect and carry local production of things like rice, because we know that the Bank of Ghana is withdrawing foreign exchange support, limiting it for setting imports, rice in particular. Senor Hossi is a major rice producer. He used to be with the Chamber of BDCs, but he's now into his own private business now, producing rice. He's going to join me very shortly. I'm going to hear his take on the budget, how it's affecting his own business, but particularly the rice that he produces. And by the way, I've tasted the rice. It's fantastic local rice. We need to promote and encourage such businesses, because that's the only way we can reduce pressure on the dollar and also produce and encourage Ghanaian businesses to employ Ghanaians. I'm going to hear his take on this very important intervention that we had announced also. And then today, the policy rate has been hiked again, historic high of 27%. What that means is, if you look at it cumulatively, the Bank of Ghana has been doing this cumulatively since the crisis began, increasing policy rate. It's only in May, June, July that they kept it constant at 19. But they've increased it all the way to the historic high of 27%. Simply means that when you go and borrow now, because this is how the banks are borrowing from the Bank of Ghana, when they borrow at 27%, they will add on to that, and then it will mean that it costs you far more to borrow from the banks now. What it means is that if you're a small business, a startup, whatever it is that you want a loan to now expand your business and employ more people, you are going to struggle because you're going to be paying more interest rates for you. So that is a downside to it. But the upside to it, the main reason why the Bank of Ghana is doing this is to mop up excess liquidity in the system, because the belief is we have too much money chasing few products, leading to inflation. So if you do this, you take out a bit of money in the system, and then that will control inflation. But the truth is, if you look at the inflationary figures, although Bank of Ghana has been doing this over the month, it hasn't really shown a direct correlation with slowing down or reducing the inflation rate. And so should the Bank of Ghana still continue doing this going forward? The Bank of Ghana governor said that they expect the rate of inflation to get worse next year, peak before it gets better. And they're hoping that this sort of approach will help them do so. I mean, it's you have to balance the good and the bad of this, right? The bad is affecting businesses who can access funding and capital from the banks because it's too expensive to do so. And also, the other way around, it's also dealing with inflation. Inflation is a big, big animal that must be tamed. If you bring it down, the erosion we've seen in our salaries will be contained, okay? So that's a key point to note. But again, this is the story here I wanted to note, the point I was just making earlier. The evidence is on the board, because if you see policy rates going up, but inflation is going up nonetheless. So when policy rates are going up, what you should hope to see as a central bank is that this line here should be trending downwards. Whilst the policy rate is going up, it should be pulling it downwards. But we are not seeing that happen. Both are on an upward trajectory. And that is not good news for the Bank of Ghana. They should possibly, some have said, think about it again. I mean, globally, we've seen central banks doing this. But in our case, the evidence, the gap is widening. Because if you hear, as of March, I mean, well, even if you come to February, we were neck and neck in terms of inflation and policy rate. And then it starts widening and widening and widening. So the inflation is not responding to the policy rate hikes. Should we continue on this path? The evidence tells me you shouldn't. But who knows? The Bank of Ghana knows better than I do. So they've kept it there. And then finally, you holders of the government securities. This is the part that many investors, that's the biggest complaint on the market right now. Because if you look at government domestic investors, represent 152 billion amount, right? That is 84%. If you break it down, banking sector is holding 91 billion of those bonds, right? 50.2% exposure. And this is going to be restructured. The Daily Finance, my good friend Joe Jackson, will join me in the studio right after this. And he will tell us, because what it means is that people who are invested through him are going to take a hit. And what about the bank? How will the bank struggle to cope here? And we have non-banking sector, 61 billion, 33%. Something's going to happen, right? The Bank of Ghana governor was complaining about this today, that he's very, very worried about the banks. And so they are watching them very closely to ensure that they are solvent in the midst of talk of restructuring. We are in dire straits, apocalyptic scenarios being talked about. When I return, I'm going to be joined by people who know this industry. They've been there. They're employing people in rice production, in the financial sector, and also in agri generally. Joe Jackson, my panelist, will join me. Senor Hosi, who's a big time rice farmer, produces some of the finest rice, in fact, the finest rice, local Ghana rice on the market. And then we'll speak to the Chamber of Agri-Commerce also. Stay with me. You don't want to go anywhere. Hear this and how it affects you. And thanks for staying with us here on PMS. My guests are already seated, and the conversation actually, I must tell you, I've already started. I'm looking forward to this because they are businesses. You know, we've had a lot of the theory and the numbers. Let's talk to those who live it on a daily basis. Joe Jackson, Director of Business Operations at Dalex Finance. I'm grateful that, Joe, you could join us in the studio. Senor Hosi is a businessman, and he runs a big rice farm. And he will tell us about it, Senor. Senor, first of all, the name of your rice farm your rice business is called what?
It's AGL, and the brand is Gogo Rice.
Gogo Rice. So
in fact, I have one here. I can show you. I can show you how Gogo looks like.
Gogo Rice. Is it perfumed?
It's jasmine, perfumed rice.
Okay, but I must...
No preservatives. It is fresh crop. It is not stored for a year or two before bringing it to Ghana. It's live produced right here. When you taste it, it's better than what you actually eat. Okay. So forget about the genos. Local rice is the way to go. Not because it's local, because it's actually superior.
Yeah, I mean, that, and it's the evidence is there. Most people will say, look, in terms of the fiber content is higher, and fiber is good.
I mean, what we do at our mill,
yeah,
we actually do not overly polish it like you actually get.
Yeah.
So we can retain a lot more of its nutrients. So it becomes, it's a lot more superior. The flavor is better, it's tastier. And I think that I've not really seen proper policy position, even though a lot of rice has been mentioned in the budget. I'm sure when we get to that part.
Yeah, there's a lot of rice in the budget. We'll talk about that. And Anthony Morrison.
The rice without substance.
Anthony Morrison is CEO of the Chamber of Agribusiness. He joins us on Zoom. Hello, Anthony. Anthony will join us to connect. Please unmute for me so we can hear you. But certainly, let me start with you because the budget was read. We've talked a lot about the theory and what it means for et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But as a businessman, purely as a businessman and the CEO of the Gogo, rice, what was in it for you?
Well, to start, I'm diversely invested. I'm in the fund. I'm in the investment banking business. I'm in the agribusiness.
Oh, so you are with him then?
Yes. So
and apparently he's also in your rice.
So there's quite some convergence at some point.
Yeah.
I'm also in the technology business and a bit into the insurance business now. What's in for us, for me, is shock.
Shock?
Yeah, real shock. I think that the finance minister spoke nicely written out stuff, but the substance really gives us less confidence. You look at our problem today, it's sitting significantly on the fiscal side. So we're expecting to see a lot more fiscal consolidation. But what are we seeing? We are looking at a plan to increase our budget deficit. That doesn't give us good signal because that means that we're going to be crowded out even more from the funding market as businesses because we need to invest in all these projects. Very nice thing said. But when you look at the budgetary provisions for it, it doesn't seem like it's sustainable. And I take rice. Rice has been mentioned a lot of times. I did not see the policy proposition that really seeks to transform a single agri sector. I see an intent expressed. I want to turn rice around, poultry, maize, but that's grammar. What exactly are the policy propositions that you intend to roll out? You can't tell me you're looking at 110 or so thousand hectares of land to develop. Rice alone, if we really want to cut out imports, we need to develop about 450,000 hectares. If that's what you really want to do. What are we doing really right now? Less than half of that, all right? So exactly what the structured policy proposition to even transform a single sector is not really seen out of this budget. And that depresses me. It seems like a lot of rhetoric without real substance to support it. I must also confess all we've seen so far is the budget statement. I've been on the Ministry of Finance website.
To try and get the...
In fact, I'm not too sure the budget statement is even available on the Ministry of Finance's website because I still see 2022. If I'm wrong, please forgive me. But the actual details, because I need to see the fiscal tables.
Okay. So my researchers say it's there. They'll get a copy.
No, I have a copy.
Okay, I'm talking about... No,
I said I have a copy.
Okay, the full one.
I'm saying I have a copy, but I can't find it.
Okay.
On the Ministry of Finance's, website. All right, that in itself is telling. So we are all waiting to see what more we have on the fiscal tables and the projected fiscal tables. But generally, when you're looking at this level of fiscal deficit, you're not seeing government trying to drive a lot more fiscal prudence to enable us have a lot more suppression on our current monetary impacts on the fiscal side, because you actually end up with a lot more pressures on interest rates. Because government is chasing the same city that you and I, he and I as businessmen are chasing. People have to make a decision. Do I give money to Dalex or do I give money to government? Because when you give money to Dalex may have to come and fund me. And I will actually get into the real sector. But the real sector is going to be competing with government. We haven't seen any structured policy proposition trying to deal with that. But that aside, go back to the Greek and all the plenty rhetorics in the USTAT, DBG and all. I do not see a structured policy. I'll cite one example. The central bank recently announced that government was not going to support rice with FX. You remember that?
Yes, yes.
And I see it's my problem with policymakers. I'm losing tolerance for all of them.
But that should help your business.
You see,
because one of the items listed is rice.
It is political speak. And I don't think that policy is well thought through. And that's what happens when you don't really consult properly the players in the industry. Who in the industry was invited for this conversation? Now you tell me, when you say, I'm not going to support imports, what's the size of imports? Official data says 43. 43%. We the ones, that's the local production, 43%. That's what Ministry of Agri says. Those of us inside, we know is lower. Okay. You understand?
It's around what's more realistic?
Well, unless if back of the palm, which is not proper for an economic policy analyst as me to do, maybe I'll say maybe around 30% thereabouts. But let's grant the 43. So you have this 67. You have this 57, that's outstanding. That's about 1 million tons of milled rice. Who is going to fill the gap? We must fill the gap. What policy structure do you have in place for us to fill the gap?
Local produce.
Because for us to fill the gap, we need to cultivate 450-something hectares.
Okay.
So if you're not going to do that, it means that local production will not fill the gap. So what happens? We still will import. But we're not going to import with Bank of Ghana dollars. We're going to look for other dollars, meaning that the cost of the dollar for those imports will go up. Who is going to make the money? It is the FX traders. What you could have done is that you'd have rather introduce a rice development levy or tax, whatever name you want to give it. Then you use that money to help support industry, grow that 450-something thousand hectares required to be able to knock out imports over time. But what have you done? What you've done right now, local production is not there. You don't have proper policy to really support or fund us to expand capacity. So you're going to make money for FX traders who will be sitting down and looking at commodity swaps for rice and other things across the world. I don't see the sense yesterday and I don't see the sense tomorrow over that policy. I see a good heart wanting to do a good thing, but hasn't thought through the thing that he wants to do. And sadly, it's not consulting.
Okay, so
that policy is off.
The rice farmers were not consulted.
Well, I mean, I'm a member of the executive of the Rice Millers Association. I'm a part of the core group there. Nobody spoke to us. Meanwhile, you are talking about rice. So unless somebody was speaking to us, I spoke to my president. Nothing.
He doesn't know about it.
So unless somebody, but all you just needed to do, Evans. It's sad.
Let me bring in Joe.
Rice development levy. When you get that money, we come with a structure, create an independent body to come up with a clear structure from seed production to land tenure management, irrigation to paddy production and milling. The banks will all follow with the capital to support it, and this is just gone.
You also in rice somehow, you know?
Well, we did give money to rice farmers.
Okay, so you finance, right? Okay.
Yes. It wasn't a very good experience, but...
So you agree with him?
Oh, I do. I do. Let me tell you what. You're asking, how good is this budget?
Yeah, for you. I mean, for your business and for businesses generally.
Even before I get to my business.
Yeah, okay.
Since the budget was read, admittedly, this is anecdotal, but I've spoken to a number of businesses in our sector, in other sectors. You know, the predominant thinking. We've got to prepare for next year. We've got to consolidate. We've got to downsize. We've got to gird our loins.
When you say downsize, do I hear you say job losses?
What more do you want me to say before you understand downsizing means that we spend less? It means that we employ less employees. It means that because truly, there's a certain sense that this budget did not address the fundamental concerns that have led us to this situation. You have a crisis, right? And if I may have the slide I gave you on the screen.
Yes, please pull up the slides that Joe Jackson had requested to show.
You have a crisis, right? You said it in the beginning. The crisis really, we're living above our means. So you have a crisis, and the crisis tells me that, look at it.
So that's
it, yes. It says that at this moment, up to September, I'd earned 65 billion. But I had spent 109 billion, and I had borrowed 44 billion. Then your own numbers, and here I'm taking every number from the budget, says by the end of the year, I would have received 98 billion. I'm not too sure about that, but let's give it down. And I would have spent 146 billion. So I would have borrowed maybe just about another 500 million more. But the deficit is 44.5 billion. When you are in a hole, what do? You stop digging. How then do you now start to borrow 61.4 billion in this new budget? How is that going to inspire confidence in me? How is it that, first of all, you've gone very aggressive, you are going to increase your revenues from 98.1 billion that you estimate to 144 billion? We could have a whole discussion on that. But let's give that to you. Why are you spending 205 billion and having to borrow another 61 billion? When you borrow 61 billion, you know what it means? Interest rates are still going to go through the roof.
And tonight we've seen the Bank of Ghana now hike.
Forget the Bank of Ghana. The Bank of Ghana rate is not the issue. Yeah. The issue is that the government is borrowing any bit of money there. The rest of the money, the CD has lost its role as a store of value. So everybody, even if you have just some a few CDs in your pocket and you can only afford $200, you feel that, well, $200 is better in dollars than what 3,000 CDs in my bank. What's happening? Inflation is killing me. The exchange rate is cutting me up. The CD rate is destroying us. Then we have a haircut coming. That haircut, I don't have to say it. You heard the governor tell you about the amount of instability that the haircut is going to bring into the.
You said they're worried. They're keeping a close eye on the banks.
Yeah. He's saying it
to keep them solvent.
He's the governor. He has to be nice about it. They're not worried. They are shaking in their boots because some of the institutions are so exposed. Me as Delex, my money is expensive, so I do the barest minimum bonds I can. What the law says is what I do because I can't do any more than that. So we have this weird situation today where if you give your money to Delex, I'm not going to give you a haircut. But if you give the money to the government,
you're going to get a haircut.
You're going to get a haircut. Well, this is the world turned upside down.
Yeah.
Risk-free becomes a riskiest. Can you imagine?
Yeah, absolutely.
But seriously, the issue is this. The CD tanked because foreign investors lost confidence.
That's really what happened.
And foreign investors lost confidence because they could tell from our numbers that we are unable to pay our debts. We've now confirmed, the deputy minister has confirmed, if there was ever any doubt that we can't pay. Borrowing 61 billion cedis is not what you do when you can't pay. You take an axe to your expenditure. I'll be honest, I just this evening that I got what I thought was a reliable version of the tables and I started looking through. Some of the numbers just don't make sense to me. Why is there 80 billion still there for the cathedral? Forgive me, I don't know. Why is there a contingency vote of 1.4 billion? The Office of Government Machinery, I don't care where you came from. Why is it at 1.4 billion? Guess what? Ministry of Food and Agric, right? Do you know how much we're giving them?
How much?
1.2 billion. Do you know how much we're spending on free SHS?
How much?
2.9 billion.
So the same thing that...
Do you know? Wait, listen.
So you tell me how many...
The Council of State
already
is receiving more money than the Food and Agric Ministry.
You're kidding, right?
Well, the numbers are there. Start drilling down. The point is this.
Looking for it.
It's not, we want reassurance. We want to believe that this government can even carry the rest of the country with the austerity budget it has to impose. We want to believe somebody is trying to bridge the trust gap between the government and the public. That can be done when you trim down and all of us feel that you are taking the pain as much as we have to take the pain.
I mean, Senor, I'll come back to the Zoom shortly, but back to your rice, because from what Joe has said, there's nothing there that encourages your business to thrive. So how are you surviving? How are you able to produce such fantastic rice in the quantities on the fields you have? How many hectares are you cultivating?
My brother, there's a term now, Accra live by plant. I don't know if you've heard it. We have to find a way to survive. And you can't be looking up to proper support from government to survive. My business this year has thrived, and I thank EcoBank,
Okay.
Dansaki and his team a lot for the support that they've given. And guess how? Kwesi Kobo and his team, fantastic people. They believe in Agric, but Agric is one of the few things that you can use to turn around an economy as ours in 4 years. But the focus, the attention, the structured planning has not been.
How many people are you employing, for example?
Well, I mean, we have those who get employed as a result of our business.
So direct and indirect?
Direct and indirect, you're looking at about close to 3,000 people now.
Yeah.
Close to 3,000 people now.
Wow. And then direct?
That's direct, we keep lean. Because we work with a lot of our outgrowers and fund them. So we're doing about 100 there.
But even the 100 is a lot.
It's a lot of people. It's a lot of people.
So you're talking about indirect distributors,
not even distributors. I'm talking about the real farmers and those who are providing the support services to them. And Agric is a very interesting sector. The social impact is just enormous, but it's a commercial project. So people must think of it commercially for you to be sustainable. But that's one of the problems we have with our policy making around Agric. We see it as a social project. So almost everything is spent. We spent over 4 billion or so on this CDs, on this PFJ. And that was proper dollars back then, all right? And we spent so much money on it. But if you look at the sustainable structures in there, you can't touch it. There's very few you can really see. You look at our irrigated land that the Ministry of Agric actually reports in its facts and figures. The latest they have is 2018. How can you take agric sector seriously? And on your website, your latest facts and figures about agriculture is 2018. Even yourself, what policy are you making? You see, I mean, forgive me, but I'm losing my tolerance for all these things because it's our hard-earned money that we put in there. When I wake up in the morning, I don't see my wife and children alone. I see a whole army of people who are dependent on my ability to succeed or to lead right. And I also see people who I also vote into office, I pay my taxes to, and I expect a lot more in their policy making and with their visibility on data. You should be more impactful. Policy is beautiful. It's one of the things that we should all try and do if we get a chance to. Because one single move has positive impact on millions of lives. But so is it that one negative move can affect more than millions at a time. And that's where we are. So I was hoping to see a proper anchor. I see the efforts around revenue. All right. Okay. These same things were largely said in the previous year. Implementation, I don't know how far we were able to get there because the numbers don't support it. More importantly, we should be looking at our expenditure. We haven't seen any proper work on expenditure. Most of our state-owned enterprises are overbloated. You understand? You take a place like Boston, what, I don't know, 500 or so people. I mean, you call Provincial, let him tell you how many people. His organization has NDC and MPP Boston. They have different caucuses in there. Ridiculous. Everybody comes, they pack it in. But boss can be run with no more than 60 people, maximum, maybe 75. That means you are doing this too much. When you go to Europe and you go and see a whole huge depot, you may only see 6 people there. And the head office, not many people. When boss used to be run with almost the same number of tanks, it used to be like 65 when Adoyobo was running the place. How many people today? Hundreds, almost 500. Tor, 1,000. VRA, I don't know. Ghana Gas, everybody wants the child or somebody to go in there. Whose budget are they chopping? They're chopping all of us. Then you have ministers, all these people, Bo, everybody, business class, blah, blah, blah. Please, the president shouldn't tell us about 30% what do you call it, salary decrease. Have you been looking for the state-owned enterprise CEOs lately? And then the ministers, and then the deputies. Most of them are always traveling. So what have we exchanged it for? I think we should keep our 30%. Pay them and reduce the traveling. Reduce the per diem and the traveling.
You have to submit a travel plan.
Please, they're always traveling. Because even the person who is going to approve the travel plan is also looking for travel opportunities.
Yeah. Joe and Senor, let me quickly get the thoughts of Anthony. Anthony Morrison, he's a CEO, Chamber of Agribusiness. Anthony, can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Give me your reaction to the budget. I mean, how does speaking for your members, did you hear anything in the budget that gave you confidence that you can do business next year and thrive?
Well, thank you very much, Evans, and a very good evening to Senor and Jackson. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
All right. Okay. So I think that this budget is actually a fight or a design for the bourgeoisie as against the. It's completely a budget that is out of place. Not properly aligned to the priorities of this country. And I also think that if you bring a budget in and put in $500 million for agriculture insurance, when nothing is going to agriculture extension delivery service, then it is as saying that you just putting money somewhere for somebody to tap into for free. Agriculture insurance will only work in this country where certain key variables are in place. We do not have proper irrigation system. Irrigation penetration rate in the country is about 17%, probably even a little less than that. And we're looking at the fact that we have very good externalities of bad roads, increasing our post-harvest losses on the farms. Sometimes it takes even a week to drag a truckload of food from the farm gate onto the main road. And also the fact that our seed industry, government still owns the local seed producers in Ghana, over 150 million seeds. Fertilizer producers are also being owned. And this is a government putting $400 million into agriculture insurance when you own the industry that is supposed to develop where you want to put the insurance. I don't know, but trust me, this budget has no hope for the industry. And above all, we have proposed certain things to the ministry, and we were expecting that, for instance, the most poorest person on the streets of Accra and in Ghana today will be able to have access to bread and water. However, we are being told that a 2.5% somewhere is going to be placed on our commodities like wheat and other things that are imported. We propose to the government to remove taxes on wheat because everybody in Ghana today eats bread almost every day or probably 4 times in a week. So this is a budget that has no hope for the struggling masses, no hope for the vulnerable, and does not actually have any social intervention in place, does not have any kind of mechanism that will strengthen the rural economy, which produces over 70% of the food we eat. And you see, if we continue to go the way we are going, where we mix food security with agribusiness, we will never succeed. The point is that we need to separate, like people like Senor Hosi ought to be supported to produce extensively for the buffer stock. As we speak, buffer stock is empty. Our food balance sheet used to be 2.0. That is production carry forward plus import. That's import in warehouses and others. Now we are in negative. So, for instance, our food inflation figures in the coming few weeks are going to double. I'm saying this for a fact that when you go to the northern region, those who used to do 5,000 hectares of maize are doing about 850 or 1,002 as a result of challenges to seeds and fertilizers and other derivatives, especially fuel. So when you see 10 major commercial farms in the northern region who have downsized their production by 60%, then you understand where I'm coming from. Go to the poultry sector. The poultry sector has collapsed, and we can't do any possible projection for the poultry sector in Ghana. A sector that has downsized more than 60%, a sector that has closed down almost 2,700 poultry farms, and that is the largest employer of the agriculture sector, the poultry value chain.
I see.
And don't forget that most of the maize farmers produces ostensibly to feed the poultry farms. So if poultry farms are collapsing and maize farmers, their cost of production have gone up, now an acre of maize will cost you between 7,800 to almost 8,000. So this is about almost 3%, 3 times the amount required we did last season, which is around 2,700. So our challenges are enormous, and this budget, I mean, I have it in front of me. I've been looking at it since last week. This has no hope for us. I'll give you one other example.
Yeah, finally.
And Senyo has touched on it. A country that does not have data is as good as dead. We do not have data on anything. Where the Minister of Agri is presenting to Parliament possible projections of acreage in terms of yields, the actual rate or the actual yield percentage of most of our commodities are actually 2 times lower than what he's presenting. So when you have a ministry that actually contests its own figures, and you see the point also is that the agriculture extension services at the various regions are not well resourced. For instance, a region is provided with 2,000 annual budget to actually do agriculture extension delivery. And nobody can work with it. Budget, crop population, and several other things are very important. So these are some of the things we need to address before we talk about agriculture insurance. These are some of the things we need to start to address before we start to talk about how we can bring certain critical interventions on board. But as time goes on, I will highlight.
I mean, I think the consensus around the table is that this budget didn't even begin to touch on the real needs of business. And Joe, I'm coming to you. You've already unpacked the real issues, and you've talked about what is going to happen next year. And I think that's where the real issue is. Businesses are already now planning, but they saw the budget. Were they planning this before the budget or after the budget?
The thing is this: you could tell where we are with inflation. You could tell where we are with the CD. You can tell where we are with your costs, and already you're thinking, I'm in deep trouble. And then there's a budget coming, and the budget holds the promise, that maybe there'll be a turnaround, or at least I could see a turnaround soon.
Yeah.
Now, when the budget comes, and it seems like, in spite of the rhetoric, we still listen. The expansionary nature of this budget leaves everybody feeling down.
I mean, that's the heart of it all.
That's the heart of it all.
The heart of it.
It's the expansionary, if the budget was, it's interesting that the more austere this budget was, the more it would have inspired confidence.
Okay. And it would have inspired investments.
Yes.
So as a business, you're not inspired?
No, I'm not inspired. I'm not inspired because we are spending more. I'm not inspired because we are planning to borrow more. I'm not inspired because I look at these numbers and I say, that investor who has jumped out of a CD position, when he sees that we're still going to borrow 61.4 billion CDs, that we are spending some, 40% more than we did last year, that investor is not going to come back here. And for me...
And you should also remember that with all that you've done so far, you're actually planning to give people a haircut.
Yes.
And after this haircut, you are still planning to do worse.
Now, let me tell you what the scary part is. You want to borrow 61.4 billion. You're not going to have access to the foreign markets. You're not going to have access to the local markets. So either the IMF is giving you all the 61, and IMF and related parties, because I've seen in the budget line 64 billion coming from IMF and co.
So bilateral.
So that's where they are balancing the budget on domestic.
You're balancing the budget based on that. But my point is that.
Balance the budget on debt. Look.
Yes. There's a 64 billion projected. Look into your budget numbers carefully. There's a 64 billion projected to come from the IMF and its related agencies. And when that comes, well, that solves your problem. I pray so, because I'm worried.
What's your worry?
I'm worried is that anchored on all this is 144 billion that you are supposed to raise in revenue from a base of 98 billion. This is an economy that is only projected to grow by 2.8 billion at 2.8% at best. This is an economy where businesses have been devastated by inflation, by a very, very high, what do you call it, interest rate regime, devastated by this CD that is just tanked.
But look, a low revenue to GDP ratio.
So where is this expansion in revenue going to happen from?
There's no point building this budget and speaking GDP. When I was reading the statement, I encouraged the minister, just let's stop this thing. Nobody is GDP. And in a country where we are very inefficient relative as far as our revenue to GDP ratio is concerned, GDP almost means nothing to government's real coffers. That's why you see people chilling in town and government is still broke. You know what I mean? The truth of the matter is you have to cut your coat according to the size of your cloth. And running a government is running a bigger home. So just bring it down to your own home, your domestic life. When you are in debt and you do not have enough income, what do? You keep borrowing and borrowing. Or you scale down. So that progress, you only pay your debt from your surpluses. Your debt will only reduce when you make surpluses and use it to pay your old debt.
Joe,
But at the end, there are two important things. So for us as businesses, it means that we are going to still compete with government for income. That's if they will get it, if they will get the money. Two, it means that we're actually going to have a lot more money being pumped into the system. I'm worried about monetary inflation. That's why the central bank is also hiking up its costs. When that happens, for us as businesses, trying to invest to actually boost production becomes more expensive. I have to pay back today at 35, 36% per annum. Adding. And what are you doing to support my business? Zero. I got the president, 6 cabinet ministers come to my project, my factory, when it was being done. All grammar, up to now, nothing. All right? But just thank God for Gesal and these people, and I have to fight my own way to get my way through. I think that we should commission a productivity audit on Exim Bank, all right, the Exim Bank, and also put in an evaluation mechanism to really start assessing the development bank, because as it's been mentioned a lot. We've had the Exim Bank all this while. How come is it that it's not been a trigger to transform our economy? And now we have stopped talking Exim. Think about it. We are now going to development bank. There's a management problem somewhere in our policy making and in our deployment of key policy tools to really drive things. There is something that's not adding up. Because after all the money that we have put in Exim Bank, our productivity is not able to sustain our FX.
I mean, and Joe, I'll come to you to wrap up, but Joe, quickly, if you look at your industry, are you seeing any movement around the markets, etc., investors? I mean, are they abandoning ship, or people are just hopelessly left their money there and say, there's nothing else I can
first
do?
of all, you've got to realize that the sector, our biggest challenge now is going to be this haircut and the effect on our numbers. That haircut is really the biggest thing.
So there's a lot of fear because nobody knows what exactly it's going to look like.
Thank you. Yeah. And with this budget, I'll be honest with you, nothing we've seen so far inspires the hope we have. And I told you, hope will come from austerity.
Okay.
This budget is expansionary. you want to do something to inspire me, go and take an axe to your costs.
Okay.
A big axe.
And Basenyo, but you're still doing well with your rice.
My brother, let me put my go again. I got my
You're still doing well with your
It's
rice.
available at all the Shell shops. From tomorrow, from Wednesday, you find it at all the Shell shops.
Is it
Ghana flag.
Jollof that is on it?
Jollof Master. Jollof Master.
Oh, that's what you call it.
Oh yeah, it's Gogo rice, but his nickname is Jollof Master.
Because I don't
And bear in mind, listen.
yeah, I think Jollof.
And bear in mind, I always say,
No, but why are you hiding it? I mean, I should take it home.
Oh, you can take it home. It's all yours. And you see,
I have to be greedy.
I brought it in a jar. So you see the quality of the grains. Clean. All made in Ghana. This is how we turn around our economy.
see.
The production that Baumia and Co said in 2015, 2016, when they wanted power, was not wrong. When they came to office, they have not done very little to support what you were saying.
Okay, so they've not put their monies where they are.
See,
They have put their monies where their
that's
mouth
what I tell
is.
people. It's easy to speak poetry, but acting it is a difficult thing. That's why people end up acting prose.
Yeah.
All we've heard from policymakers today is that they've been speaking poetry. And trust me, NDC and people, we now draw. Speak poetry, and then they actually act prose. Where are we? Here we are.
You know, but at least it's a good example.
You know the amount of money I've
But
lost.
I hope you've not stopped financing, the rice, or you were bent, so you stopped.
no.
He will not easily jump and fundraise.
let me tell you what-
Very briefly, because you need to wrap up on
let me
that.
tell you what the challenge is.
Yeah.
If you are funding farmers and we are still rain-fed,
Okay.
you carry a huge...
Yeah.
That's what I was telling
Anthony
you.
talked about
That's
that.
what I was telling you. When you are serious about this, the first thing you ask, you make the right investment, the right.
Let me tell you.
You want to take 1 million.
Yeah,
How much land do you need? This. You know that rice needs
Put your money.
irrigation.
I mean, let me hear Joe.
What do we have? FOCO.
6 years ago,
Very briefly.
I had one village, one dam.
Yeah.
And I was really
Excited.
6 years now.
Yeah. Very little have been seen. Anyway.
We know what to do.
All the best with the rice. Gogo is called.
And I thank Joy FM. At least you gave me a chance to get some small mouse today. You have also supported local business.
Well,
But I tell you this, local rice is healthier.
Yeah, it is.
But
keep supporting them. Keep supporting them.
I eat local rice.
Okay.
I always eat
Enjoy the rest of your evening, people.